There's a book that seemed to have been forgotten. It's called Love, David. So for those of you who haven't read the book, it's basically a series of letters written by David, who's the main character. This is a young boy who's growing up in the Cape Flats. This is a place that is filled with crime, poverty, and broken dreams. So he writes about his life, his struggles, and the people around him. So David lives with his mom, who's known as Ma in the book, and she's a good woman, but she struggles to keep things together. She's a domestic worker, and his absent father was a gardener as well. There's also a guy called Buddy J, who's basically a respected gangster in the community. So at first, Buddy J seems like the kind of man that David wants to be: confident, respected, untouchable, and feared. But as David gets closer to Buddy J and into that world, he starts to realize that being a criminal and a gangster is way too violent. The betrayal, the pain was too much. And later in the book, David falls in love with a beautiful girl called Bettina. This is a girl who represents something good about his life, something pure and clean. But his environment is full of things like drugs, gang rivalry, and hopelessness. And this keeps on pulling him back and downwards. So this book basically shows his inner conflict. Does he want to become like Buddy J, or does he want something better for himself, for him and Bettina as well? So he writes this to express his confusion, his anger, his longing for love. So hence the title, Love, David, as if he's writing a letter to life itself or even to God. There's a fantastic scene in the book where, spoiler alert, David witnesses Buddy J fighting with someone from a rival gang. So as Buddy J pulls out his knife to go to work, he hears kids in the background saying, "Slice, Buddy J, slice." Slice as in cut the other guy. That's when David realizes that violence in the Cape Flats has become so desensitized that even kids would cheer on a gangster fighting. And it was something like a movie or a film for them. And that's when David decided that this was not the kind of life that he wanted for himself. So it's an amazing book, and yes, we did study this at school as well. And at the time, we thought it was boring. We didn't know the use of learning such a book or reading such a book in literature class. But looking back in hindsight, I've realized that what the schools were trying to teach kids of that age was things like empathy and basically just everyday choices that we make. So it's a fantastic book. It's called Love, David, written by Dianne Case. It came out in the 1980s. So if you can get your hands on one of it, do so. And don't mistake it, there's another book that came out with the same title called Love, David, by a Canadian author whose name is Irene. I just forget her last name. But it has a similar storyline and so forth. So, and both of them were studied in school. So yeah, don't mistake the two. The second one came out in 2000s, but the original one came out in the 1980s. Slice, Buddy J, slice.